Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's lesson is about mastering texture with a pen. Now, the majority of my lessons for my channel is with a pencil, but I would like to dive a little deeper into a pen and do some more videos on it because I feel that not only is it more requested in the comments and on our Discord, but the pen offers such a unique way to sketch. It's hard to explain unless you get your sketchbook out, get your ballpoint pen out, and just start drawing. Now, if you want to draw along with me, I suggest using a ballpoint pen. The liquid ink pens, the repeatographs, they won't give you nearly the amount of detail that you would like to achieve as a ballpoint pen will. Okay. So let me first explain what the heck you're actually looking at. This is a creature that is drawn all in ballpoint pen, so I'll slide down here so you can see the scale of a regular human being with this massive beast, and there's a little story going on, you know, like, hey, what's up, Billy? And then, you know, Billy's like, hey, what's up, Charlie? You know, I don't know their names. But anyway, the layering with a pen can be intimidating, but also very fun. I've mentioned this before, but I want to go a little bit deeper into my techniques that I use to actually layer. All right, so if you're drawing along with me, make sure that you're not gripping the pen very hard. You don't want to grip it hard, and you don't want to grip it close to the end, because what that means is you're immediately going to want to jump into detail, and you don't want to do that. Not yet. So with a pen, you'll notice that the lines that I'm putting down are very unorthodox almost. They're scribbly, they're scratchy. But what I'm doing is very, very lightly, I'm going over previous areas that I've drawn or I've scribbled on, because they really are scribbles. If you look at this arm right here, it's the scribbles. But you'll start to notice that as I scribble, it's going to start to fill in the gaps of the paper. And lo and behold, this area right here on the creature's, I guess, secondary forearm, that can be, I mean, that looks like scales. It can look like old wrinkly skin. It could look amphibious or rock texture. You can achieve a lot of stuff with a pen that you could with a pencil. But the thing with a pencil is that the graphite spreads a lot more than ink does from a ballpoint pen. Okay, when you look at this creature's like chest and torso and shoulders, one pass with a pencil shading, and I can probably fill in this entire area with just one pass. Yeah, there'll be some open areas and I'll have to turn the page and shade again, but then it's done. With the pen, you can't do that, just because the lines are so skinny that you would have to be careful about that. So this is why I definitely encourage small, controlled bursts almost with a pen. Okay, so there's no distinct pattern that I'm using. It's kind of well, actually I take that back. There actually is a pattern that I'm doing, and I'll show you up here. So if you can master figure eights, okay, just moving your hand back and forth until you make hundreds and hundreds of eights, like the number 8, back to back. And it's almost like a bow tie. So you go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and you keep that motion. Then you move down, you keep moving down. So what that does is it gets your brain used to firing that way when you draw with a pen, because it covers such a vast area in a short amount of time that you can achieve a lot of texture on top of that. Now, I do encourage you to hold your pen like I've been teaching you to hold your pencil, lightly. Okay, my pinky is actually keeping my palm off of the page for the most part, or it's preventing me from pressing too hard down. Too hard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to very lightly make sure that my pen is slightly turned to the side, because you can achieve actually some pretty nice shading with a pen like you can with a pencil when you turn, you know, the pencil to the side and it starts to shade in there. You just have to be careful not pushing too hard with a pen, because the second you push too hard, it's black and it's dark forever. Okay, or unfortunately, sometimes ballpoint pens are faulty and you'll get an ink blotch that'll come out, which is why I suggest anytime before you start a sketch session, please just do a couple lines over on the side of the drawing or the side of the paper to get the ink flowing. And sometimes if we used the pen a day prior, the ink that isn't used anymore actually clumps up and dries at the end. That's what creates the blotches. So you have to get that dried ink off. Okay, and then you can start doing it again. Plus it just kind of looks cool. It just looks like a nice sketch page, you know? So as I'm laying this texture down, I can start to do some cool little fun hair marks. Now there is no set pattern that I'm doing now. You know, it's kind of jagged spike shapes going back over previous areas. But here's where it gets fun. Or, as I should say, now here's the fun part. The muscles that you're drawing, okay, you want to add a little bit more scribbling on the striations of the muscles and the tendons. And it's going to indicate where more of the details are going later. So those of you watching right now, you can clearly see that within this larger forearm, see that darker part that's coming up that arm? That's because I just applied a little bit more scribbling there. Okay, but very lightly. It's just a build-up. It's a slow build-up, just like building up shading and value with a pencil. So you start to build that up, and look what's happening. All the scribbles that you did prior to that are bleeding into that shadow. So then you can just start very lightly putting in some hatch marks and some scribbling on top of the shadow and that previous forearm shading. And look what happens. And it didn't take that long to do that. Now, pens do require more patience than a pencil, because the area that you cover with a pen is far less than a pencil in a given amount of time. Okay, with a pencil, a 2-hour drawing will most likely look different than a 2-hour drawing with a pen. Okay, what would take you 2 hours with a pencil might take you 3 or 4 with a pen, if you want the same effect. You know, because I can sit here, and if I see all these scales or this wrinkled skin, because I haven't decided what it is yet, and I would add some nice value, I mean, I can't touch the ballpoint on the paper very hard at all. And I just have to keep going back over it and over it. So when you look at this and you're doing this technique, it's actually going to look kind of dirty, almost like you accidentally took your finger and the oils smudged the ink before it dried. This is actually a good thing. You want that shading in there, because what happens is, if you notice this creature's elbow and the joint right here. Okay, so let me put some more in here. And hopefully you can see it on the camera. I have the resolution set as high as this can go. Okay, and you're going to want to change direction too, maybe put a little bit of hatching in there, but you'll start to notice that this whole area is a little darker, okay, than the brachialis and the bicep over here. Now what you can do with a pen, and this is the beautiful thing about texturing with the ballpoint pen, is that the markings can immediately go dark, or they can immediately go light. So you have a full range of values with a pen, which is intimidating too, because what I suggest doing is getting comfortable with a pencil first so that your hand pressure is controllable, and then you move into pen. All right, but you have this area. Now I'm going to push slightly darker or slightly harder in certain areas where I want thicker wrinkles to show up, and voila. Look at the texturing that's happening, and I haven't really put in a lot of work. Who said scribbling was a bad thing, right? There you go. So now a cool effect is I have some thick wrinkles, and then on top of each individual wrinkle, like the skin fold that's coming towards us, there's already texturing going on there. I got nice layering with the scribbling back and forth, and then I took my pen and very lightly put in a nice pass that looks like smudged ink almost. But then it turns out that it's actually working. I don't want you to smudge your ink, okay, because you're not going to get the same result. Drawing on top of hand oils is probably one of the worst things that you can do, because one, it's going to bleed, and two, the ink on top of paper texture is different than ink on top of oil on top of paper texture. It happens a lot in pencil drawings. This is why I always suggest students, and just artists in general, hold your palm off of your page, most of it with your pinky, and just kind of glide your hand across. All right, so this is one of the techniques that I like using with a ballpoint to cover very large areas in a short amount of time. And it's going to take a little bit of patience, because the other thing is you're going to see this big area and you're immediately going to start getting ideas like, oh, I want to put spikes there and I want to put all this stuff. You can't do that yet. The reason is because you can't start erasing holes and the wrinkles to put spikes and imperfections in the skin back in. All right. What is down is down. So you have to plan ahead on the areas that you want open. So for example, if you look at this, you know what, I don't even know if that's an elbow joint. Wrist joint. Okay, let's say this is a secondary wrist joint. Look at that spike coming out. So you notice that in between the lines of the spike, it's completely bare. And I'm going to keep it that way for now, because around it you can see some slightly heavier shading. That's because that's the skin. So once I establish where that skin is, I can start to put some more wrinkles around that area and just a bunch of scribbles overlapping each other. And if you want a good example of what this looks like up close when you're drawing, it just looks like fuzz. And it's actually a good way to achieve the fuzz texture if you're doing something fuzzy, like a cute animal or a creature with some fuzz on it. But I'm going to leave that the way it is. And now you're going to start to see a nice contrast right there. So now it's open, and it's just because patience came in and also controlled scribbling. All right, so the next thing that I want you to watch me work on, and if you're drawing along with me, try this if you're doing a character or creature. We're going to outline an entire chest and torso, and we're going to fill this in with that technique, so what I showed you here. Okay, so hopefully you enjoy watching this, and hopefully you're learning something new. All right, so I want to establish where the crevices and the divots and the striations are on this creature. This is where patience is really going to come in, because this is a large area. So if I had lines that are previously drawn here where I wanted the pectoral muscles to be, I'm going to scribble over those and I'm going to put them back in. Now you'll notice that the creature's head is here at the top. Okay, so there's the real pec. Okay, there's, the abdomen's right here, and there's this pot belly. All right, so this could be the belly button. But over here on the side is a secondary shoulder section and chest. So I have to bleed this pectoral muscle right into the abdomen. This is where being a creature designer is a lot of fun, because we can kind of break the rules a little bit about connecting anatomy that clearly does not exist on Earth. Okay, I don't know of any animal that has an abdomen with shoulders coming out of the abdomen, that looks like this. So this is a secondary fun part. Okay, so we want to keep track of where maybe a clavicle would be, but I'm starting to think that maybe this creature doesn't have a clavicle on this part. It does up here. It's just under the fat folds. But here, there's the armpit. There's the pec muscle. There we go. So you'll notice that this area right in here has become darker already. And I achieved that simply by just rolling my pen back and forth. I haven't lifted the pen off of the paper. That's another thing that I want you guys to try. Don't lift it off the paper. Just kind of work your hand around an area where you know there's going to be more shading and detail. Okay, and then once you do that, it's going to give you an indication of where all the skin folds and all the heavy stuff probably needs to be. Even the lines are not finite. Man, I don't know what's wrong with my throat. Guess I talk too much on here. But I am putting in some heavier duty wrinkles that are going to be a little darker. And this is the other cool thing with a pen, is that you can get instantly darker. So you notice like that big lump that just appeared out of nowhere. It's only because I just darkened some crevices around it, and then I made that lump. but all of the areas in between each of the marks are shaded in already because of the scribbling. This is the beautiful thing about a pen. I'm going to keep emphasizing that. So we now know that this whole thing rolls in, and then the belly starts again, the secondary belly. So these abdomens, or these abdominal muscles, not abdomens, these abdominal muscles are going to look a little different than a human. You know, you got its secondary obliques over here. I haven't even considered what the heck is going on with that hip area down here, because you have this crazy looking leg that's in the back. I don't know what's going on under there. I'll figure it out. All right, so here could be like the diaphragm. Okay, maybe the sternum is right here, right there in the middle. It's probably a good idea for me to just lightly put in the center line, you know, like the center abdominal line. And then I'll just put in some abdominal muscles here. Does it have an 8-pack? I don't know. Maybe. If you have a name for this creature, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Please comment on what this name should be. I named it in the beginning, but I don't think it was as compelling as some of the names you guys suggest, because they're really funny. Could be Pam. I don't know. Or Steve. Steve is always a good one. Those of you named Steve out there, no offense. I just wanted to name my beast Steve. But if you guys have a better name, please suggest it. Alright, so now we're getting some gross texturing in here. So you can see the whole time I've just been kind of just putting these random lines in back and forth. And in here, in these lighter areas, these lines are so light that I have to go over them multiple times to even know that they're there. That's when you're going to be successful at sketching with a pen and putting texture in. You're probably wondering, wait a minute, shouldn't you see your textures right off the, right out of the gate? The answer is no, because it's about layering, and layering with a pen takes a lot more patience and more control than it does with a pencil. You can get away with a lot with a pencil because, again, the graphite spreads and it covers imperfections way faster. With a pen, you put one single mark in there, it looks like a hair. A single hair is sitting on your sketchbook and you want to brush it away. So you have to keep adding to it before it actually looks like something. And even the core shadow happening on this side of the body. So you also have to, I have to be aware, because the drawing in front of me, of atmospheric perspective and making sure that things in the background appear a little lighter. So I have this giant secondary arm right here. These lines right here are already pretty dark. So to contrast that, notice that I have a darkened line that outlines the arm right there. And then there's this slight highlight running down that forearm. I'm going to keep that. I don't want to do anything with that. In the meantime, I'm just going to start adding in more of a coarse shadow underneath here. Because if you're wondering, why is it that every time that I draw, my entire drawing looks really flat? And it's because when you start to group different sections together with your drawing, a lot of people don't use contrast. Each section pops out farther than the other. One section is behind the other, which may be behind another. One section may be in the foreground. So you have to play up on that. And if you have a pen, it's basically you have to do it, and once it's down, you can't change it. Okay, so you have to be very careful, and you have to start to gauge like where everything is as far as a light source. So like this light source obviously is coming from above, slightly to the left. Okay, so a nice 45-degree angle. And when you establish a light source, okay, that's really going to help you determine where these cast shadows are going to be. Because now I noticed something that I didn't before, and that is like this whole stretched pectoral muscle going into the shoulder, the deltoid, and the bicep. There's going to be some more shadow right here. It's not going to be as dark as the armpit, because remember, this is a different section than the armpit. So the contrast has to exist. This pec coming across here is a light catcher. So the light coming down, it sticks out farther. It's kind of like your nose catching more light than your upper lip if the lighting is from above. All right. So I'm just going to lightly put in some shading across here, maybe minimal hatching. And I actually will lift my pen off of the paper just so I can control it a little bit more, like that. And if you do this enough, this is where patience comes in with a pen. If you do this enough and maybe switch directions just a little bit, don't push harder, just switch directions, you can start to see that area fill in. That's good. So under the pectoral muscle right here, before you get to the abdomen, there's going to be a cast shadow of the pec on top of the abdomen. So you want to lightly start scribbling in that shadow like the technique that we did before, but this is such a small area where you can just do straight up and down strokes. And you're just going to keep going. And lo and behold, the pec has a nice little shadow there. So you want to make sure that the next area to the pec is going to have enough contrast, okay? Because with the pen, it's harder to bleed other areas into other areas because the shading isn't the same. Okay, but like with this pectoral muscle coming across here, I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. Maybe I want a darker part in there because that's the straight up armpit. Okay, but out here, there wouldn't be as much light hitting that under part. It's kind of like our own pec muscles, you know, when you lift your arm up and you see the shoulder go into the pectoral muscles, there's like a little divot there that catches shadow, especially in the sunlight. You see how also I'm just kind of jumping across the drawing too. And then after you get good with doing outlines like this, it's just a matter of knowing where to do them, which is why studying anatomy is so important. Because you can bend the rules like I'm doing. If you want to add in some muscles attached to a abdomen, it's a pec muscle, well, what does a pectoral muscle look like in the striations? And then you kind of bleed that into some wrinkles so that we are left as an audience wondering what that anatomy is underneath. Because you don't have to show everybody everything. You just have to give the indication that something is there and it's believably moving. The third thing that I want to talk about with texturing with a pen is it's not what you think as far as texturing, because we think texturing as in, oh, we got to put a ton of detail in there, we have to put shading in there, and it's got to look super realistic, there's got to be veins, or if you're doing something like hard surface, got to have buttons and all of that. But the truth is, you notice over here I have some light scribbling going on that shows an outline of an entire body part. That is the third technique that I want to tell you about, and it's not used a lot, and it should be used more, and that is indicating what is there without actually putting what is there. So let me explain. When you have a group of people, and let's say that you lightly sketch in this forearm right here with this massive, deadly, spiky hook coming off the hand. Okay, when you start scribbling in this entire shape, all right, and you're not really detailed about what's going on with it, the group of people looking at it, each individual is going to have a different idea of what's going on. That's actually a good thing, because if you're doing concept art for games or films, you want to draw things that are intriguing, that spark interest, that excite a team. And early on, you shouldn't have something so fleshed out and so solid that nobody really has any input or nobody has an imagination to run wild with. Okay, it's kind of like a novel. You know, you have all these words together and everybody's mind is different. So everybody pieces together what they think the scene is. And one of the reasons why most of the time movies that are adapted from novels aren't as good is because we're visually seeing it and we go, well, that's not what I envisioned. It's the same thing. So you'll notice that, again, with atmospheric perspective, but with a pen is a little different because I can't just put in some shading and put some mist in there. So again, I'm just going to indicate the body parts by getting a cluster of scribbles together for the outline and then lightly putting in some more scribbling in between it. Okay, so for example, we know what the wrist. We know what the wrist joint looks like. It's right here. So the creature's left wrist joint is going to look similar, but we don't know that yet. Okay, so maybe there's some battle wounds over there. What if I did this? What if I put a secondary spike in there, but there's one on this side on the inside that you can't see on the inside of that joint? That's the beauty of adding wonder to it. So I'm putting in all these shapes like that. And the cool thing is, as light as this is and as messy and dirty and gritty, you can still see a shape coming. Okay? Look at all of the successful environment artists out there that you admire. One thing in common that they all have is they know how to put an area of interest in their storytelling and in their environments. Okay, so what that does is it doesn't force the viewer to become myopic and stare at the whole area because everything has detail. It's the opposite. Okay, so you want to tell a story even with your creatures. I mean, this is a single creature on a page, okay? But there's already a story happening, okay? Who is that fella? Why is this one not looking like it's attacking it? It looks like they're talking to each other, okay? How does this human know this thing, and how do they know each other? You know, do they have some kind of agreement? You know, is he a merchant? Like, what's up with that? So that's storytelling. It's the same thing with not putting in too much detail. Okay, leave it up to the imagination. I'm trying to think of some books that actually were adapted well. You know, like The Mist, Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me. Those are amazing. Those of you that have seen The Mist, you know what that ending did to people. I still remember that ending, and that was almost 20 years ago. It was crazy. All right. So now I'm kind of just jumping around now. I'm liking what I'm seeing. So I'm just going to put in some darker lines. This is me going back to my older texturing technique from earlier. Just putting in some darker blotches there. And now the cool thing is you start to see the layering. You can still layer with the scribbles when you outline a place too. And you put those next to each other and you have something very interesting happening. It not only does it add interest to your sketch, it makes you feel better about it. Like, I drew something that's quite mysterious. It's not really solidified, so I can always come back to it. If I want to paint it, I can. But if you do something and you spend, I don't know, 2-3 days on this, and you're putting in every vein and all that stuff, sure, that's totally fine. Like if a client asks you to do that and they need a finalized drawing, do it. All right? But there's something to be said about interpretation, all right? Because we all interpret things differently. And I can even do that with the hand on there. So like we know that this creature has a very crazy looking pinky finger. It comes off into 2 fingers. Okay, and then it has one giant raptor hook and then one middle finger. Okay. Now that I'm drawing this, I probably can put a thumb in there. I probably should have put a thumb in there. So maybe the thumb is underneath the hand, but I don't want to put too much detail into that. Instead, what I'll do to help bring this creature to the forefront is I'll take my pen, because you can get some pretty dark lines immediately, and I'm going to darken the claw and then hatch my way up the finger. Okay, now that finger is closer to us than all of the other ones. Okay, so I'm assuming that the pinkies, I don't even call it that, are slightly behind it, so it's going to be a little darker. And then the velociraptor hook, I guess you can call it, I'm just going to leave it. Just put in a little bit more value in here by scribbling back and forth. And then that's it. So now you have depth happening with all of the fingers in the hand, and I really didn't do anything. I'm just concentrating on what's in the foreground, what's in the middle ground, what's in the background of every body part. Okay, so that's me getting carried away with just wanting to put detail everywhere. So you can see here, this is another fun technique with a pen. The creature's left arm and the very back, okay, that's the bicep, it's the same as this. All I did was lightly hatch in one direction. All right, now I put the hatching all the way down like this. So one thing that I have to think about now is there enough contrast between this creature's main abdomen right here and then that shoulder part over there and then that arm? And the answer is yes, because we can clearly see the outline of the belly. We can clearly see the value left of that shoulder. So just a little side tip here. How do you know when not to put detail on something? And that is, it all depends on the contrast. Now, when I'm looking at the shoulder, I'm going, okay, if the light source is coming back here, then that shoulder is probably going to be in shadow. So I have to be careful here, because I put this arm already, it already has some value on it. So if I shade this shoulder in on the other side, see that it's the shoulder right here, so it's just on the other side. If I shade that shoulder in, it can't be the same tone as that arm. It's going to have to be darker, which works because the shoulder is closest to us. The arm is behind the shoulder, so the arm would be lighter anyway. Okay, so let's put in some hatching back and forth like this. But again, folks, look what I have to do now. I can't go much darker than that because of this belly right here. If I go darker, then those two are going to be too similar. So how can I make this believable? Well, the answer is you need primary, the secondary, and the tertiary tones right there. And if you're doing it with a pen, you got to layer this and have a little bit more patience. So that is, I'm going to go back over that shoulder on the edges, right over here. So why the edges? It's because not only is that the core shadow, but the core shadow on this belly is right next to that shoulder. So the shoulder has to be lighter than the belly if I want to show some depth. The core shadow on that shoulder is darker than that arm in the background. So now I have a pretty successful like groups of shading going. And what I could do is I could actually go a little bit darker on that belly up here, but I got to be careful. I don't want to go too much darker. Okay, so there we go. Now we have some secondary areas, and it's catching some shadows. So it's pretty cool. I don't want to put any more on there. Here, I'll tilt it up like this so you can see it. We have a lot of details already, and you can keep going with this. So like if I wanted to go back to the arm, I would just lightly outline a vein. Okay, very small controlled circles. When you're in such a small area, you don't need a straight line. You could do scribbles back and forth and it looks like you're drawing a straight line. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly starting to level or to layer on a large vein that's happening across there. Or a scar, I don't know, whatever you want it to be, whatever I want it to be. Okay, so hopefully you liked today's lesson. I encourage you to check the links in the description about our Creature Design Workshop Discord. It's a bustling community. It's absolutely free to join. Everybody's joining, like people are, not everybody, people are joining every day. They're sharing their studio pics, their personal projects they're working on. They're sharing anatomical reference, and we have a whole section with like reptilian and avian and skeletal, mammalian, all that fun stuff. So you want to learn about creature design, about drawing in general. It's a great place to stop by. You know, just go in the introductory channel and wave hi to everybody. And then if you want to join August's Creature Design Workshop, I actually have a summer discount going right now. There is a discount, so check the link in the description for the website. Read up on the course and the testimonials. You can read over the syllabus. And, you know, if you sign up early, it guarantees a spot because spots are limited. Okay, but I appreciate you all. I hope you drew along with me and you learned something about layering with a ballpoint pen. And I will see you all next time. Later.